Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me on this Saturday morning. My name is Lakisha Camese, and I am the Program Director for Project Clean Slate for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We do cannabis expungements and wraparound services. We are basically the social justice leg of M for MM and ensuring that those who have been most harmed by the war on drugs also tend to benefit or less harm. And most states legalize medical marijuana, or even if they're doing adult use. We want to ensure that those people who have those charges and those convictions on their records, that they actually have a path forward to live without that burden on them. It's not only a blight on their record for if they go for jobs, for background checks, but it's also a burden because they have to carry that stigma still and that shame that unfortunately still exists in the cannabis industry, although it is legal in most of these United States. Thank you again for joining us on this morning. And it's a day, and I know it's a week with me today. Actually, level policy director, Mr. Eric Foster, who has more than I think it's 30 years of experience in the policy area in dealing with our legislators in Congress on a federal level. And he has been phenomenal in his impact in his home state of Michigan, of where he has helped shape cannabis laws to that we have and our communities. And that language is centered around social equity and social justice. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring Eric on, and we are going to have a lively. It's not a fire starter, a fire side. All of the finite intricacies regarding rescheduling. As you know, um, we recently got scheduled from a lot of people are cheering it. It's a great step. Don't get me wrong. This is a huge step for this industry right now. After so long of advocating and meeting with legislators and really just giving the facts and the information to those who help shape our world, our industry, that this should not have been scheduled from the beginning. Scheduling is quite a step. I'm sure, but also with this step comes a lot of consequences, laws being enacted. We are prepared to go level, on a state level, and what does it do regarding anything social equity or social justice wise? So, without further ado, Eric, how is my sound now, Satin? Awesome. All right, Eric, please join in.
Hello, how are you doing?
I am great. Look, I am just so excited that you joined us, first of all. And second of all, Eric, he's like a mentor to me. He's amazing. He has scheduled and did all the strategic planning for our M4MM lobby days. We just came back from our 420 lobby days, and it's a huge success, wonderful impact. I just want to give this man his flowers right now. He is amazing. He is phenomenal. He knows exactly what we need to do to have the biggest impact in a short amount of time. Now we only lobby what 3 4 days on the Hill, and I can tell the impact. I mean, just the engagement that we had. We had meetings scheduled. we had people that were actually willing to sit and listen and treat us as subject matter experts. And that's all because of Eric. Because let me tell you, I don't know if y'all have ever done policy days with Eric, if you've ever worked with him. He had everything laid out. He has all the background on every one of your legislators. So if you need to know any information, this is the guy. This is on all that info and how to really engage your legislators. So Eric, um, let's just kick it off. Let's start right here with rescheduling in the cannabis industry, right? Um,
Yes.
we went from a one to a three, and first of all,
Well, hold on, hold on. So, one, your sound keeps going in and out.
oh no,
So, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
let me set my sound to. Hold on, let me do this. I am going to set it to my door microphone. How's that? Hold on. Okay, how's that going?
Okay, that's better. That's
Perfect.
better.
Okay. All right, let's do that.
Okay.
Yay, finally.
So, the there's a few things. So, first off, we are not rescheduled yet. So, I want to
Okay.
make sure that everybody is fully aware. We are in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And in life, everything is a process. When you were born, your first step after coming out of your mom was breathing. You
Right.
had to execute that first before you could start anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, similarly, cannabis is on the path of it's getting ready to take its first breath
Right.
from a federal dynamic, but there's still more actions that need to happen afterwards. Once the baby breathes, then you don't just say, okay, you good. Now just go ahead, grow up and live in the world. You've got additional actions that need to take place. And that's the same thing here for commercial cannabis and for the industry in general is right now the DOJ
Mm-hmm.
through the DEA has developed a 92-page proposed rules making document. President Biden has spoke on it and given it his blessing. Now the Office of OMB, which
Mm-hmm.
is the Office of Management and Budget, is still reviewing all of this for them to then send back for the DEA to open up public comment on the
Okay.
proposed rulemaking. Now, that public comment period can last anywhere from 30 to 60 days. And for members of M4MM, for members of other cannabis advocacy organizations, and hell, even for the folks that are on the opposite side of us in cannabis, that'll be your opportunity to weigh in and provide feedback to the federal government as it relates to what they should or should not do and how this process could and could not go. After they get all of that information, then what they'll do is they'll review it and they may make changes to the proposed rule based on public comments and feedback. And then if they do that, then they would publish the final rule. So we're still a ways away from getting to that point. And I think that's important to tell everybody because when we hear the articles being written by a myriad of subject matter experts, traditional media organizations, conservative media, MAGA media, liberal media, because there are different categories of media,
Right.
getting a lot of different views and a lot of different information. And then unfortunately with social media, Ray Ray and Pookie and Billy Bob and others are going on being their own reporter,
Right.
and they are trying to give you their reporting spin on what's taking place. And so one of the things that I would recommend for everybody to do is you can sign up for a few things that I think would be helpful. If you go
Perfect.
to dea.gov,
Mm-hmm.
you can sign up for alerts on the process of rulemaking that they're doing with respect to this particular act. If
Mm-hmm.
you, and then I'm gonna, as we go through today's meeting, I'm gonna pull some other links as well that I want people to go to, because ultimately this show and what we're talking about is only going to give you information for right now. There's going
Right.
to be continuing information, things that happen. And so you're going to need to sign up for news alerts from the
Right.
actual agencies that are doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't sign up for Bebop's alert on cannabis, because Bebop don't work for the Department of Justice, the DEA, Health and Human Services,
But that's who
etc.
they trust. They trust Bebop. How can we get them to trust the people that are giving the real information? That's the thing. I mean, they're gonna say, "Oh, I got to talk to the government." Well, if you want to get your comments out there, you want to be a voice, you want to be an advocate, you want to be heard. Even if you are the center of what's going on regarding this industry, you really do need to voice it to the people that matter, right, Eric?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You have no choice. And that is critical. I mean, come on, people. This is just part of the process. You want something to happen, you want things to happen in a certain way, you've got to get in the game and get in the game in the right way. Now,
Right.
how do we get here? So let's talk about how we got here, because there's a whole lot of information with respect to what can and can't happen in terms of the rescheduling process. And there's a lot of people, I call them street experts, but even learned experts that have different interpretations of law.
Right.
And that's okay. Everybody can look at law. And I really like it when you have learned people who are looking at law and they're debating the application of those laws. But in the Controlled Substance Act of
Mhm,
1971,
mhm.
there's a section 21 USC 811, and that section deals with the process of rescheduling a classification for a narcotic or for a drug. Now, when cannabis in 1971, when this act was passed by Congress and signed into law by President Nixon, cannabis was basically put in supermax prison with heroin, opioids,
Well, it never
cocaine.
should have been in the first place, right?
No, it should not have been in supermax. That's like taking somebody who has been a teller at a bank and putting them in supermax prison with gang leaders, drug lords, etc. That's overkill. That's way overkill.
Yeah.
But that's what happened. So if you're going to reschedule a medication, or if you're going to reschedule something, then what you actually do is in that particular section of statutory law, and I am actually, I thought I had pulled that up for yesterday. So give me a minute to pull it up while we're talking. But I want to go through the steps that actually takes place with respect to the process.
Right.
And so,
And just for people with background purposes, with the Controlled Substances Act, I tell people all the time, I said, cannabis, marijuana, whatever you want to call it, never had a chance. I mean, we had cocaine and Coca Cola, we had LSD being used for mental health issues, and in some variation, some type of mushrooms, psilocybin, that type of thing. But marijuana and cannabis really hasn't been studied, and it was criminalized from a racial aspect, and that's just to be honest about it. It was steeped in racism. That's why it came under this act, and it was used to criminalize Black and Brown people, which is still doing to this day, unfortunately. And
Yes.
everyone needs to be aware of this act and how it has governed their lives. And I know there's a lot of people that's like, I don't get involved in politics. However, this is a situation where legislators took upon themselves, and you have um, this act in place. And I mean, I don't know if there were public comments. I'm sure I could look it up, in like Alexis or Westlaw or something like
Oh
that.
yeah. Well, there always has to be public comment.
Right. And
So
so
that's one
this
of
is
the things.
this is why we're telling everyone right now, hey, when these public comments open up, you need your voice to be heard. You need to have accurate information. You need to let them know why you recommend what have you, whatever changes, amendments to this rescheduling. This is your time, and the time is now. It's not only just a presidential year, election year. It's also a time where you are really fighting for those freedoms and democracies that you hold near and dear.
Okay. So I had pulled it up. So there's been numerous times, 2011, 2016 were the last two times, and now we're in 2024, but it started in 2023, where there were formal requests for cannabis to be reviewed for rescheduling.
Right.
So the first step is after that request was submitted, and this was the first time that a United States president actually
Mhm.
asked for the review. Other times it's been asked for by external stakeholders, which external stakeholders can request for things to happen. So, as a citizen, just want you to know you can request for the government to look at things and to take a study or review in the process. And so, this, though, was the president asked for. So, the attorney general gets it, sends it to the Department of Health and Human Services. Health
Mhm.
and Human Services looks at it, and then they go through an 8 step process of factors determinative of control or removal from schedules. And that includes actual or relative potential for abuse,
Right.
scientific evidence of pharmacological effect, if known, state of current scientific knowledge relating to the drug or other substances, the history and pattern of abuse, scope and duration and significance of abuse, any risk to public health,
Mhm.
psychological or psychic dependency liabilities. I'm not sure why psychic is because we haven't evolved to that point where we are like Professor Xavier from the X-Men and able to use, or Jean Grey or Emma Frost, and use our minds in that capacity. I'm sure it's going to happen at some point, but we're not there yet. So I'm not sure why psychic was put in because them psychics that you call online, they ain't real. But that being said, that word is in there, psychic. That word is in
Well,
there. It's in federal law.
I tell people, read the laws. And although it may seem a little boring at times, it really has nuggets of things where it's like, you can't be kidding. You've got to be kidding me. This isn't real. There was actually a law they tried to pass in New Mexico where if you call yourself a psychoanalyst or a psychiatrist, you had to show up in court in a full wizard's outfit with an 18-inch hat and a wand. So
Mhm.
I'm so glad that their governor said, no, we're not going to do this. But, it's funny the things that people try to put into the law. So this is why we're telling you, read the law. If you're not sure about the
Yes.
law, come to some of us experts. Let us interpret it for you. Let us, read it and parse it for you. So Please continue, Eric.
Okay. Okay. So like I said, so you have all of that, and you now get to the particular point and the particular place where once you go through those steps of review and process, then you will the HHS, Health and Human Services, will make a recommendation to the Drug Enforcement Administration, to then determine if it should or should not move forward. Now, in the past, we've always been stopped at that particular point. But
Right.
because of, and this is an important thing for everybody to understand, cannabis is a pharmaceutical drug. Now, let's be real. I know people use it for individual use, and that's your civil liberty right.
Right.
But cannabis is a pharmaceutical drug. You can't claim and tout medical and health benefits and then actually have research in states like California and Pennsylvania and Connecticut and Massachusetts and Colorado and starting up now in Michigan and other places that actually delves into the medical benefit and the medical application towards specific health ailments, and then say it's like alcohol or tobacco,
Right.
because alcohol and tobacco ain't got a damn thing to do with healing nobody or nothing.
At
I
all.
know specifically because, and point of full disclosure, I know sometimes people say, well, don't say that, Eric, because then people are going to look at you strange. I am manic depressive with bipolar tendencies. I take Zoloft as a part of
Mhm.
counseling and my spiritual growth to help me with my manic depression, and that those things work. In
Right.
my younger days, I used to drink a lot to try to deal with it because I was
Self
undiagnosed.
medication. Yeah.
Exactly. Alcohol didn't help me one damn bit to deal with it. It actually made it worse. So you can't say that
Right.
cannabis is like alcohol and tobacco because it
At
actually
all.
helps with health ailments.
Hmm.
Seriously, people, it
It
actually
does.
helps people. Now, in this instance, we were able to have the Health and Human Services Department. Now, they had to modify their health effects and medical effects regimen to
Hmm.
fit within this structure. Now, there's another act that also relates to the rescheduling and classification of medications, drugs, narcotics, etc., and that's the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act.
Right.
And so they couldn't take it through that particular process, but they were able to construct a process to review, and they use data from states that have been studying it because a number of states have adopted medical research standards and practices for cannabis in their state statutory laws.
And
And
that's vital right there, Eric. That is very vital
yes,
because a lot of people there, even when we were talking to one of the legislators, one that I came across for Louisiana, of course, was a doctor, a medical doctor. And so if you're talking to your legislators, if you are engaging these folks, you want to have those numbers, that data, that those facts and figures on your side to say, hey, we're not trying to, you know, a lot of people still have that stereotype of they're just hippies, they're just stoners, they just want whatever. But I've seen those medicinal properties. I've seen where children who were suffering with seizures and unable to engage with autism, they can take, a tincture, a few drops, and they have a better quality of life. They've gotten along better with their family. They can actually engage with that person, and we can't
mhm,
discount that. So we need those studies. We need that data to present it and show that this is like Eric says, it has medicinal properties. Alcohol and tobacco, those are just, MODs. They're merchants of death. That's what they are.
yeah, yeah. Now I ain't gonna lie, I had some good memories during those days. So
We all
that
did.
just is what it is. I did have some moments,
Right.
but that being said, you don't want to actually overdo it. And
Right.
actually, I'm gonna give you all that you can share. I'm putting it into the chat. This is the link to the actual proposed rule, the
Nice.
schedule of controlled substances for the rescheduling of marijuana. Now, they still have to use the word
Perfect.
marijuana because that is a legal term. And I know
Right.
marijuana has a racist background in the verbiage, but it is a statutory term. It's just like in law, the statutes that are in a lot of states where you can't tie up your horse in front of your house between the hours of 9 p.m. and 8 a.m. in the morning, or you could be thrown in jail. There are
Right.
actually laws that still have that as a statute because they consider that horse abuse. So I'm
Right.
just saying we have to follow the terms that are in the law.
And we
Now,
have to do the same thing in Louisiana. Instead of calling it a vape, for when our medical cannabis industry it was just starting, we had to call it a metered dose inhaler according to the language. But we know what it is. We know that it's basically, having a vape or a vaporizer type delivery of marijuana or cannabis.
right. Now, share this with folks so people can go to it. The link will take you directly to the PDF document, and
Right.
it's 92 pages. Now, I love reading. I read probably 3 white papers or studies a day,
Right.
30 news articles, and continue to consume information. My grandma Foster
Mhm.
and my grandma White, as I'm starting to really look at it, there were a lot more things that they agreed on than I actually thought because they didn't really like each other. But they both agreed heavily that you have to continuously learn and be in
Absolutely.
continuous study. So if you are an advocate, if you care about cannabis being rescheduled and moving through this process, you need to read this 92-page document. That's
Take
just
it in bits and pieces, whatever you have to do, get through it. Say, I'm going to give myself a whole week to get through it, or a whole weekend. I get it, Eric. I mean, I'm that person. Law school taught us to read 200 plus pages a day, and then you're consuming
mhm,
news and media from podcasts and from trusted news outlets. So I know it's a lot of information, but this is vital because it affects your future. For those anybody who says that they're fighting for cannabis to be legalized in some shape, way, form, or fashion in your state or even federally, this is a document you have to pay attention to.
right. And then there's another doc I'm going to put in the link for you all to share, and it is a questions of regarding it's questions related to the potential rescheduling of marijuana. Now, this is a 36-page document, and once again, it's also at dea.gov. But by giving you all the links, can you all see the links in the private chat?
Yes, we do have the links, and I
Okay,
believe our
and if y'all
producer is
can
going to go
publish it,
ahead and post it in our comments in the chat. Yep, and get that
good,
going.
good.
Perfect.
So
Awesome.
this is going to be your cliff notes that gives you the federal government's perspective from both the Attorney General, from the Department of Health and Human Services, and from the DEA, and from the Office of Management and Budget. Well, not yet. Office of Management and Budget hasn't finished their review yet. They will then add to this, but this will give you some additional background to understand questions and get some Q&A for how do you move forward. And the DEA actually has concluded that marijuana meets the Schedule 3 criteria as well, even though the director of the DEA didn't sign off on it, but that's okay. They don't have to sign off on it. one monkey don't stop no show.
Absolutely.
Now, just as a point of personal privilege and point of order, I'm not sure why monkeys and shows were that important back in the day.
It's
I
the
don't know why
circus.
they
They
were.
didn't have much in entertainment. I mean, they probably didn't have a lot of TVs and everything. So
But I mean, did the monkeys form a union? Was there a situation where one of them was
hey,
like,
now
"No,
you know they're against
we're
that.
not working," and they were like, "Well, maybe we can get another one to replace him, like scab labor." I don't know, but that phrase just hasn't made sense to me still. But so I say all this to say now we are in that particular point. And so those are, I just saw somebody pop up and ask for the link
Yeah,
again.
and that was Thunder. Thank you, Thunder, for tuning in. And also Michael from Michael Diaz, one of our Better Days deliveries. Awesome young man in Colorado, part of our M for MM family. I just posted those links in the comments that should be on our YouTube channel. So check those out, and they'll also be in the crawl periodically throughout this.
Now, here's the thing. And so that everybody can understand, why did we have to go this particular route? Why couldn't we just go to descheduling?
What
And
everybody
so,
wants, right?
right. And so I'm going to explain why right now. Now, M for MM's formal position is reschedule administratively, deschedule legislatively. The reason being is, and I'm going to go back to cannabis is in supermax prison with all of the dregs of society.
It's up there before
This is
codeine, ketamine,
right, but
morphine.
this is a
Yeah.
step in the freedom process. But because cannabis has been stuck in the hole for 50, let's see, so, yeah, 53 years.
Yeah.
53 years because I'm 52. So 53 years, a year before I
I
was
went to
born.
law school. I can't do math. Go ahead. Look.
You have to have a structure for how do you free it from Supermax.
Right.
Right now, in statutory law, there's not a regulatory structure that is encompassing of how you would free cannabis from Supermax if you just deschedule it.
Right. And
Now,
also advocates want that, Eric. They gotta understand if they say, oh well, we'll just schedule it tomorrow. Let's just play out the scenario. We'll just schedule it tomorrow. What are you gonna do? What kind of regulation and compliance do you have? Because right now, currently each state has their own regulatory systems and their own compliance ways. They're trying to navigate it. Like I said, they're trying to build this plane as it's flying in the air. So they're still catching up on how to actually regulate this and be in compliance. And if we have something like that and leave it to the states, it's going to be just the wild, wild west. It's going to cut out most of these, solo entrepreneurs or the small businesses. And it's going to be something that no one really wants, where like big pharmacy takes care of it or takes over it, or it's going to try and regulate, like how you said, like alcohol or tobacco, in which it should not be.
right. So the framework and so the dynamics of what we're dealing with, folks, is if you're going to let it out of Supermax, if you just deschedule administratively, now our interpretation of 21 USC 811 is that once you have qualified that cannabis does meet the medical benefit use and that its harms are not in an addictive state, that it would cause addiction similar to its other Supermax prison colleagues, then you would have to reschedule because that's where the law would drive you to rescheduling.
Right.
Which is basically you're going to put it in probation. You're going to put it in probation in the halfway house. So it's going to be in the halfway house it can go out and work, but it's got to report to that halfway house in the evenings and over the weekends.
Right.
But that's a step from Supermax to a halfway house. That's progress. If you want to fully free cannabis, well, it's just like criminal justice reform that relates to
Mhm.
cannabis and criminal justice reform in general.
Right.
You need to actually have a structure. One of the things that we failed on as a country is when we incarcerate people, the structures of actually helping them deal with the life challenges that led them to be in prison are really not addressed.
At
We
all.
have the most punitive prison system and incarceration system in which the quote unquote rehabilitative aspect is we're going to treat you like crap for however
Mhm.
long you here, and that should be the deterrent from you ever wanting to come back.
It's basic warehousing. They do nothing as far as social program. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some places where you can earn your college degree, things like that. But most of those people who are doing those things, they're there for life. They have no options for parole. They're not ever going to come out. They can be a benefit to their fellow inmates or incarcerated persons as the quote unquote jailhouse lawyer, but it shouldn't be to that destitute situation. A lot of times, and I will tell you, Eric, because I've worked within the criminal justice system for many years. A lot of times they only offer these social remedies, these programs to advance your education or anything as a deterrent from you doing anything violent or idle minds and idle hands in the penal system. They want to keep you busy so you don't go get into trouble there and cause chaos for their staff there instead of actually doing what you're supposed to do, which is equip this person and enrich their lives so that they can actually come out and be productive in society.
Exactly. And so, to that particular point, that is a real challenge that we're dealing with out here in these streets is that you don't have a framework where people are really focused on how do we help people get out. So it's the same when we talk about cannabis, the same when we talk about any real criminal justice reform. You have to have a structure for
Right.
how do you help this person acclimate back to society. Well, for cannabis, if we went the declassification right now, there is no structure. And so in Michigan, I used to chair a nonprofit in Michigan, Travelers Aid Society of Metropolitan and Detroit. And Travelers Aid Society is an international nonprofit organization. In Michigan, we focused heavily on work with respect to at risk homelessness and returning citizens from the correction system. And that was something that I really championed. I was an activist board chair. I got into the weeds, per se, of the programming, our facilities, meeting with the people that we were helping, meeting with policymakers and stakeholders to try to get funding. And what we found in Michigan, this is when Jennifer Granholm, who's now the Secretary of the Department of Energy, was governor. People, they created a program to really try to structure help as people were getting ready to be released. Because before her, when Engler was governor, John Engler, we basically, when you got out of jail, you were given $120, a bus ticket, and good luck and God bless.
Figure it out. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
And that's BS because
Oh,
everybody has had help. We exist in help. Jesus taught us, if you are a Christian, that you help your fellow man.
right.
If
Even
you're
in the
Muslim,
African proverb, reach back, Sankofa, pull those people along with you that are
right,
left behind. So, yeah.
even if you're Jewish or Muslim, in the Quran and the Torah, which heavily rely on the Old Testament, and the Torah and the Quran has a whole lot of New Testament because Jesus is all up in the Quran. it's still the same points of helping those that are less than or have less than or are
Mhm.
behind. That's just how you roll. And so for cannabis, we've got to create a structure that comes from statutory law.
Mhm.
Laws like, or proposed laws like the Cannabis Administration and Opportunities Act, the
Mhm.
MORE Act, which are Democratic led statutory law bills, or even on the Republican and MAGA Republican side, the States Reform Act and the
Mhm.
States Act 2.0, which
Mhm.
have a structure. Now, those two don't go as far in the details. And as a lawyer, Lakisha, I think you'll appreciate this. There's a case right now that has the potential to overturn the Chevron deference.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Chevron deference is what gives federal regulatory agencies, it was decided in a case, I believe it was 1981, in the Chevron case. I think it was U.S., it wasn't U.S. v. Chevron, but it was a case that decided that the federal agencies, when a law had ambiguous language and nature to it and didn't have a clear sense of Congress in
Mhm.
how it was written and structured, then the agency would have wide deference to be able to determine how to implement it.
Right.
This case has the potential to overturn that. If it happens, you're going to need to go back and have laws get into the granular minutia for
Right.
how they should be implemented versus where they are now. So this goes from basically laws that might be in the effect of an executive summary into now laws having to be like Tolstoy's War and Peace,
Mhm.
the full version, not the abridged version.
And see, the reason that people don't understand is they'll probably look at, well, why was it written where it's ambiguous and where it's not clear and concise? A lot of times, laws are written in a broad sense because there's a lot of gray areas. It's not black and white, and they have to allow for judges to apply their own interpretation of that law according to whatever jurisdiction that they're in. And more importantly, people, this is important that this is overturned because it not only affects things like EPA's regulation of commerce and things of that nature, it affects even women's rights, as far as like shipping birth control pills or shipping a plan B or abortion pills from state to
Or
state. Yeah,
emergency health care, which is
right.
right now an issue that's being challenged in courts because in states like Idaho and other MAGA led states, you have the states that are trying to overrule federal guidelines on the provisions of emergency care that are in statutes, and I forget the name of the statute that actually deals with emergency health care services that are supposed to be provided to women
Right.
in the event of complications with pregnancy. Well, you got states that are trying to overrule that. And
And they're shipping
so,
these women wherever. I mean, they're in
right.
full labor and they're saying we can't treat you, and they're shipping them off where they can actually give birth or unfortunately have an infection or bleed out or have some a health complication en
Mhm.
route. So this affects all of that.
Right. So you have to have, so under that whole premise, you have to have a structure for how cannabis would function because cannabis being a pharmaceutical medication, there's three lanes of functionality to it.
Mhm.
There's the pharmaceutical and medical dynamics. So, how would we treat it as a prescriptable medication that could be covered under insurance, that could be prescribed beyond the world of specific medical doctors who prescribe cannabis currently at the state level into a more regimented national structure for prescribing cannabis and getting, and where can you get it from, including dispensaries and or potentially CVS. Rite Aid definitely needs it because Rite Aid's struggling out here in these streets. So Rite Aid's
Oh,
probably like,
let's not
please,
touch that one.
Rite Aid's probably like, please, baby Jesus, give us cannabis. Please, baby Jesus, let us have that so we can go
They need
ahead.
some help.
Exactly. So the the dynamic in terms of the, let me go back. So, then you've got the dynamic of adult use,
Mm-hmm.
individual use, civil
Right,
liberty dynamic. So this is
right.
where the application of how you individually can go buy a 40 ounce or a fifth. And for those that don't understand those terms, that is because those are black terms of drinking. That is a 40 ounce of
Oh,
beer
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
or a fifth of Hennessy or cognac
Little
or,
bottle. Yeah.
you know, any other or vodka, etc.
Brown corn liquor.
Right. For my white colleagues, a six pack or a shot. I actually did a speech in public speaking when I was at Oakland University on the benefits of 40 ounces over six packs. I got a 4.0, and that speech in that class is still talked about to this day. And he actually brought in empty 40 ounces and empty six packs and talked about the economic dynamics and showed the visual value of getting a 40 ounce over a six pack. Yes, I
It
was
makes
that
sense.
student in
It makes
college.
sense.
I was hands on in my
More bang
research.
for your buck.
So you've got to have a structure if you're going to free it. And that
Right.
is similarly to the structure we have to have when we really talk about criminal justice reform and restorative economics. How do we
And I'm
help a
glad you
person?
made that shift. I'm glad you did that because although Biden has taken such a huge step in really, fortifying his stance regarding cannabis or marijuana, it's still, if you look at it, rescheduling to 3 has no implications whatsoever regarding those with cannabis convictions or have been charged, or those who have those records still out there, or those who are still serving time. It still does not decriminalize this issue regarding the use and selling of cannabis. So,
But here's the thing, it's not supposed to because that's
right.
not within the statutory law. When people, especially our allied partners in the cannabis world and cannabis freedom world, get upset with the president because of that, here's a
Mhm.
functional reality. That's not what the law currently allows.
It wasn't
It does
designed to
not
do
allow. And
that.
so, if you want to have those impacts, if you deschedule, there's no house for cannabis to move into. There's no job training for cannabis to get a job. There's no supportive services to help cannabis deal with any depression issues or other issues. It just needs it wouldn't have anything. So there
Right,
wouldn't be
right,
any sort of automatic through descheduling process for criminal justice reform,
right,
restorative economics, impact on immigration. You need statutory law
right,
that addresses all of those areas. And so, like I
right.
said, there's the buckets. There's the pharmaceutical bucket, there's the individual use bucket, and
Mhm.
then there is the economic, there's a restorative economic dynamic. And to
Right.
me, the restorative economic dynamic covers everything from the levels of criminal justice reform relating to cannabis,
Mhm.
the economic inclusion and supplier diversity, not just on licensing, but also in the supply chain of providing services. Guys, social equity is really minority business enterprise, women owned business enterprise, disadvantaged owned business enterprise, socially and economically challenged business enterprise, veteran owned business enterprise. It's all of the laws under Title 49 and Title
Mhm.
13 that govern from a small business vantage point how we actually classify businesses to help them from disadvantaged communities. Well, that's what social equity is, but with the add-ons of the over policing and over criminalization of
Mhm.
cannabis. I
Right.
think that's an underpinning of why a lot of the social equity programs have failed, is because they've got amnesia and they're not tied to their true selves, which
Right.
are statutory laws that cover and govern how do you help minority business enterprises, women owned, veteran owned, and other classifications of challenged business enterprises get opportunity and succeed. So that's in it, but also immigration
Mhm.
reform and how you deal with cannabis from an immigration dynamic, housing and access to federal benefits, mortgage. There's a
Mhm.
bill that Democratic number two, Kathleen Clark from Massachusetts, had put in for veterans regarding being able to get their VA benefits for getting home loans, which
Mhm.
is a challenge right now because technically, if a veteran is a cannabis user or works for a cannabis licensed business, they can be denied the ability to get their VA benefits to
Right.
buy a home.
And then
Those
it
are
affects
real
them,
things.
even physically, just health wise, because, VA Veteran Affairs does not recommend you using cannabis. And what if that cannabis, and I've seen many veterans, I know one personally, where the use of cannabis actually saved their life because of their PTSD that they suffered while serving. And nothing else did that. No pharmaceutical drug, none of the therapies that they went through VA hospital, but this plant helped them,
Right.
and that they can now be a present and a good father and a good husband because of it. So,
But you know why this plant helped them?
mhm,
Because this plant is a pharmaceutical drug that has tremendous upside with lessened negative effects. It's not like
right,
the commercials for Skyterra and other some of these commercials. I don't understand
resulting,
what they're actually trying to convey because the
yeah,
commercial dynamics in the background are weird as hell. But you know the lady or the man that comes with the voiceover reading that this drug could give you exploding diarrhea, bleeding from your eyes, difficulty breathing, heart
yes,
palpitations, night sweats, etc. You know,
19
call
side.
somebody if you have this 15 list of negative things that happen. Stay away from grapefruits and berries because they could negatively interact with it. I've seen it in
It can
some of the
decrease
disclosures.
the effectiveness. Yeah, and all
Well,
that.
cannabis doesn't have that long list.
Right.
It's a pharmaceutical drug that doesn't have that long list, but also has a wide application of potential benefits. And in Pennsylvania, they have been studying and working on clinical and scientific manipulation of cannabis properties to
Hmm.
target specific health ailments. That's the next step. And I say this as someone who has only used cannabis once on my 21st birthday. That was on my bucket list. I did my two puffs and passed.
Good
That
job. Good job. You know the rules.
cannabis does actually help people. And the cannabis advocates need people like me who are not users but know and see that it works to be out here in these streets
Right.
communicating and fighting for them, but also communicating off of real. So if we're going to have it fully address the restorative economic dynamic, including all of those lanes, immigration, federal benefits, housing, access to lending, being able to work in different industries that may have prohibitions, being able to get a security clearance if you want to work for the federal government, not being disqualified from working for the federal government. That's one thing that we hope to work on with my friend and road dog, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. And y'all better get off her back because that's a good woman and a good mom. But
Right.
We talked
Well,
about
Eric grew
working
up
on
with
a
her, so
bill.
yeah.
We talked about working on a bill that would prevent the federal government from disqualifying a medical cannabis person who's prescribed to use it from federal employment. I mean,
Right.
that's a lot of stuff that has to be addressed in the restorative economic lane. To do all of that, the adult use, the pharmaceutical lane and research, and the restorative economics, you need a detailed law
Hmm.
that gives the structure, tells the federal agencies what to do. If you just deschedule, which you can't in our interpretation of 21 USC 811, you can't deschedule off the rip. But if you could, there's no underpinning for any of that. And it's not
Right.
going to just magically happen, people. It's
And
just
see,
not.
and I think this is the problem. Like, we go back to the 2018 Farm Bill. We realized it left a lot of great areas. And I think Brooke Gardner, shout out to you, Brooke, one of our M for MM family, very active in the chat. We're seeing like states, and I have to say it right now, Louisiana, they're trying to ban all of the Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10 products that are happening. So, the states are realizing that there are these gaps that are happening that were left behind because we're still waiting on the 2023, well, now 2024, well, maybe 2025 Farm Bill, the way that
Yeah.
they're dragging their feet along. And so we have to have this infrastructure in place. Yes, it's good to get these laws passed, but just like we had 2018 and the Farm Bill passed, now we're seeing all the gaps and all the areas that it did not cover, and we're trying to rectify that. That's what we need to do, is make sure we have good, solid infrastructure in place during this rescheduling, so then we could just make adjustments as needed, and then it covers those areas, as much of those gray areas as possible.
Now, our position at M for MM would be one, move it to Schedule 5.
Right.
We believe that that's the best schedule. And then pressure on the MAGA Republicans and the few actual Republicans that are left in Congress, because
Small
Democrats
number.
are
It's a shrinking
willing,
number.
outside of a couple of Democrats in the Senate, Democrats are willing to pass the MORE Act or the CAOA Act, which actually would give you the detailed structure that you need. President Biden will sign it. So he and Democrats aren't the problem. The problem is the MAGA Republicans and the few actual Republicans that are left. There are a few. There's one MAGA Republican, Matt Gaetz, who's supportive of the MORE Act. He's the only one. The States Reform Act and the States 2.0 Act are from the States Reform is from MAGA Congresswoman Nancy Mace. The States Reform Act is from Republican Congressman Dave Joyce. Republican Congressman Brian Mass is a supporter. So there's a few, but there's not enough. And so in
Right.
the next election, y'all need to, and this is Eric Foster speaking, not M for MM, but Eric
Well,
Foster
let me
speaking
just say this is Eric's
individually.
charge, because we're getting ready to wrap up. But this is
Yeah.
Eric's charge, and this is also my charge, because I tell people, vote like your democracy and freedoms depend on it, because it does. So, Eric, give your shameless plug, and I'm going to co-sign
So my shameless plug is
it.
fire people who oppose cannabis legalization. Voters have to start firing people. If you want these things to happen and you continue to vote for the people who are obstinate and who just won't do right, then you are giving yourself the self-fulfilling prophecy of not being able to move forward on it. Vote for people who are willing. And so that can be actual Republicans who are pro cannabis. There's a guy, for example, in Virginia 7, Terrence Todd. If you want to vote for a Republican as a candidate in an open seat, that's somebody to look at. If
Right.
you want to remove people who in other places, You need to remove MAGA Republicans who are anti moving forward on cannabis. And then also Democrats.
Right.
Give Democrats control of the House and the Senate and keep President Biden, because honestly, if you let the MAGA terrorist leader, and I'm not going to use the rest of my terminologies for him, but if you let him back into the
Mhm.
White House, the groups that are primarily supporting him are anti-cannabis, the Heritage Foundation, Claremont Institute, Family Research Council, and others. They are anti-cannabis, and they have a 12-point plan of how they want to dismantle cannabis legalization and programs at the state level. So don't think you can negotiate with those people. You can't. We need allies or people that don't want to do us harm
Mhm.
in Congress. That is what this election is for. Fire people from their job because they don't support moving on cannabis. And don't hire nobody that is anti-cannabis. Don't
Right.
hire nobody that's anti-cannabis. I don't care if you like them on tax policy. Don't hire their ass.
Right. And thank you for that, Eric. Thank you again, Eric, for joining us. And everyone, you have your charge. This is your call to action. This is an election year, a very pivotal one. And if those people do not share your views regarding cannabis, you voted them in there either through voting for them or not voting. Uh,
You
so
gave them
you
a job, you can fire them. You are the
Right. So
boss. You
just
can
know
fire their
they
butt.
come up for reelection every 2 years. Whenever they come up for reelection, make sure that you find those people within your community, because that's what it is. Within your community, there are people who support your cannabis initiatives. Get them ready, run them for office, support them, open your wallets to them to support them, and help them get into office so that they can push forward your initiatives regarding cannabis legalization. And that's the way you have to do it. And Eric, do you have any additional comments? If not, I'm going to let you go for your Saturday. But I want to thank you so much for everything that you do for M4MM, all of the policy insight you have poured into me and our members, and just being phenomenal and breaking this down and making it simple for everyone to grasp it and get their call to action to do what they need to do to push our cannabis industry into the future.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And once again, my political comments are not reflective of Minorities for Medical Marijuana, because Minorities for Medical Marijuana cannot take any positions in terms of for or against. So I use that just as my own commentary, but also I'm a part of an African American founded super PAC called The Future Today and Tomorrow. Website www.futurepac.today. We are a pro democracy, pro communities of color, pro restorative economics, and pro cannabis super PAC. We are supporting candidates who are pro cannabis reform, as well as pro women's rights and freedom, pro diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have to, if you want to help us in this fight, we can take those positions that M4MM can't take. We can be the ones that can go out there in these streets and fight those political battles to get pro cannabis people in and fire the anti cannabis caucus. So let's do that. Come join us. And like I said, there are not a lot of Black created and founded and run PACs. I think there are 14 that are
Wow.
super PACs or PACs that are national. We're national. Come join us and help us in this fight so that we can free cannabis with all of the support that cannabis needs, with the full structure to help cannabis. Because if we do that, that full structure will actually help with criminal justice reform and restorative economic reform for people. That's real people. If we're going to help folks, we have to have the structure to help people. So
Right.
come on here, get in this game. Let's do this. That's it. Thank you. I love
Thank you
talking
again,
to
Eric.
you.
And I think we put
Lakisha's law
everything.
game is tight. You know, she may not always advocate it, but her law game is tight for what she does. And we always have a lot of great conversations. I'm not a lawyer, but as you all can understand, because I'm a policy expert, I've delved a lot into legal dynamics. So I kind of say I play a lawyer on TV, but
You're a good TV one. I will tell you this again. I can't reiterate this again to everyone. First of all, thank you again, Eric. And I'm not sure if y'all got that website, but it's www.futurepack.today. And if you need any information on Eric, we've put his IG and social information. His email is up there as well. And again, people, cannabis industry laws drive this industry. You have to get in the game. You have to vote. You have to read up on these links that we put in the chat. You have to be knowledgeable for yourself, and you have to employ legislators that share that vision. So thank you again, Eric. I appreciate you. We've got your pack up there on the screen, and thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you at our next quarterly webinar. And Brooke, he's so funny. All
yeah,
right.
he right though. That would be,
Right,
look,
right.
and I know Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stone made that song "Sympathy for the Devil," and that's a
Yep.
great song. But don't have no sympathy for the devil, because the devil's a devil. The devil's a
Right.
lie.
And he has no new tricks. He has no new
Right,
tricks. So
right.
everything that everyone's talking about, and this is just my sidebar, my own comments, not M for MM, everything that what everyone's talking about, oh my goodness, is looking like it's going to be the Handmaid's Tale. They overturn Roe v. Wade, this, that, and the other. And I said, it works in cycles. There's no new tricks. It's the same thing. They're just rolling back all of our freedoms. So
Look,
employ
why do you
those
why do
who
you
share
why
your
do you
views.
think that the MAGA forces in Florida and in Oklahoma and in Tennessee have been so
Mhm.
focused on communicating that slavery wasn't that bad? I'm just saying.
They're setting you up
Listen
to
to their
say, "Oh,
words.
it isn't this bad. We're doing service to our country."
It was a job training program.
That's what it
I'm
is.
just
It gave
saying.
us skills for the future.
Listen
No,
to
don't
their
believe
words, people. Listen to
us.
their words.
We're dripping with sarcasm here. But thank you again, Eric. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Of course, this will be on replay on all of our socials. And this is the news that you can use, and laws drive this industry. So get out there and vote. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.